Hello there, and welcome back to The Disconnected. I'm here with Rich Johnson, who is a writer extraordinaire, audio commentator, contributor to Fangoria, and so much more. Rich, I'm humbled. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. No problem. I don't know if I'm going to live up to everybody else's interviews. You've got some great guests on so far. Fantastic. Including your wife, of course.
That's true. That's true. Funny enough, I just got a comment, and I got to bring it up because of your backdrop right now. One of the comments said, you know it's going to be a good interview when there's a wall of physical media behind them, and what a beauty you got, man. Yeah,
this is... I am in my study, stroke library, as my daughter calls it. This is one of two rooms, so you can see one wall at the minute, and literally this room is pretty much every wall except the window. And then I've got an archive which all the DVDs and everything go into, which is like another room.
Right.
Which I fish out stuff, and I still use, I still watch my DVDs. It's just obviously I'm quite lucky to have that space to have everything out. So, that I've been through periods of just sort of tubbing it up and shoving it in the attic, and oh, where's that film? Oh, right, okay, it's in tub number 42. I'll just grab that out. So now I just put some of the repeats in there and things that I'll probably take down to the charity shop every now and again if it's things that I've got too many of, repeats and things then.
Well, and with your work, you can tell that you refer back to things because you've got like citations of, in this interview, somebody mentioned this, and a clear example of that. I think this is the most recent published, right? The newest release of The Changeling.
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I think there's been Crimes of the Future has been put back to early September, I think. But yeah, I'm pretty sure The Changeling was the last one. That was
wonderful piece on George C. Scott in there, by the way. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you. So you're the one person that read that. Then that's great.
I do my best to read all of these booklets, and I try to encourage everybody to, because there's nuggets of wisdom that you pick up, and it really helps as you watch through all of this.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I love writing about film, and a lot of the time, the commissions I get, especially for that one, I was invited to contribute to that, which was amazing because it is literally one of my favorite ghost stories. And I'm never one to, even though I know about the film, I'm not complacent enough to think I'm just going to write exactly what's in my head of what I know and understand about this film. To make it interesting for myself, I like to still do some research and find a way in. But my way into that was via Philip S. Scott. He wanted a piece actually on George C. Scott, which fit for me anyway, because I've done so many pieces now for Second Sight that I'm getting into like an even more of a niche for their ghost films, which they do a lot of anyway. So you're bound to kind of come across a ghost movie, but it seems that I've done Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind with that one. I think it's the fourth ghost related one. I think I did Host, Lake Mungo. I can't remember what the other one was. And then obviously The Changeling. Yeah, George C. Scott, my God, what an actor.
And that's got to help when you're writing a piece and the character at the center of it is somebody as formidable as George C. Scott. I mean, he's got interviews for days. He's got a stature that was intimidating. He's got a filmography that is beyond what many actors could even dream of.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think... as that piece picks up on, he puts a lot of himself into his performances, and you can tell by not just the performances but the choices of the roles he's taken in the first place. They feel like they're a cathartic exercise for him, and he's kind of just letting it spill out, and the rage and everything that you experience. And I mean, my first introduction to George C. Scott was his Christmas Carol, which I think is phenomenal. But I grew up with my dad just hating it, hating his performance. He's American. He's got an American accent. What's all that about? It's like, well, you got to see beyond that. Who's to say that, Scrooge in this instance, he was somebody that maybe settled and he came from that background, or he traveled, or he was. You can kind of read into that, I think, and I don't think that takes anything away from his performance. In fact, he does quell his accent. It's not as bad as my dad ever made it out to be. I think it's one of the best. Definitely one of the best Ebenezer Scrooge performances, and I would probably say Albert Finney's Scrooge is my favourite, but I think that's from a nostalgic point of view. If I'm being objective about it, I think A Christmas Carol is a better film.
And then Britain got back at us with Michael Caine taking on the Muppets, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
That's my favorite.
It's another good one. Yeah,
I've always loved the Muppets. I've got a Muppet tattooed on me. That's how much I love the Muppets.
Oh, Muppets, yeah, Jim Henson, yeah, absolutely. Way in a way in for me with film. Right. I would say Jim Henson.
Well, I mean, other than Second Sight, you've touched Arrow Video. You're consistently writing for Fangoria and Diabolique and a bunch of stuff that you've contributed to over the years. What was what got you started into contributing?
So I worked as a graphic designer and illustrator, which is something that now has kind of dropped off because of the journalism. So I'm an educator, really. I'm in higher education and course lead at degree level. So that's really where that's where everything works for me and comes in, because everything I practice outside of my teaching for me is to inform how I am as an educator, and vice versa as well, to be honest. So I would probably say about 20 years ago, maybe early noughties, I was working as a graphic designer, and it was just as, the internet was booming then, and I was working for an e-commerce company, and I was discovering really what the internet was about, and how much, as everybody was, how much you could find out, and reviews and websites, and how much more easily accessible it was to be able to get your work out there, and contact magazines as well. So there was, I spoke about this on Chasing Labels, and there was a magazine called Hot Dog, which was fantastic, really good magazine. So I dabbled in it then. But what happened was I was so sucked into my graphic design, and then changing course, career direction slightly as well by going into education and still being freelancer. And then I wrote a novel as well at the same time, and so much was happening. I got married and I had a kid. So my love of film was just that. I kept it purely as something I just absorbed, and I was quite happy just to watch stuff. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I worked on a project which I can't really say anything about at the minute because it got shelved due to some Harvey Weinstein level controversy. Some people will probably work out what film it is. It's shelved. It will see a release, but that commission came from me deciding to write a book about that particular film. And then via the links to that book, that then gave me the contacts to start contributing to Fangoria, which is probably what I guess the Fangoria pieces have been the most consistent. Right. Things like the boutique labels, even though I am on a fair few releases, there is no way I'm in the levels of like Lee Gambin and Kat Ellinger and all of the no way. I'm just scratching the surface. But it's their full-time, Kat in particular, so that's her full-time job. With me, it's like I've got other things that I really do need to focus on. So for me, it's kind of something that I'm taking a hell of a lot more seriously now. And it's nice to kind of have the work out there. So that was the route in. I dabbled in it before, and then I kind of came back to it. And I'm always using it in my lectures, and I do cinema courses as well in the evenings. Right. So I've got my main job, and then I'll finish there, and then I'll go down to my local art house cinema, Broadway Cinema in Nottingham, and then I'll do. Mainly at the minute, it's Hollywood courses because they're the ones that I've seemed to have found a little bit of a corner on. And no one else is covering that. So I started with New Hollywood, and then I kind of moved into the 80s, and then I've gone back to like old Hollywood, and
nice.
And I'm doing Hollyweird soon, which I'm going to be looking at Lynchian LA kind of vibes, and so that's kind of the path and where it's gone. Really, it's really exciting, and it's
a long way to say you're good at everything. I'm going to throw that out there first of all. You are kind of great at everything you touch.
Well, thank you. I don't think I am. There's a lot of things I'm not good at, like mowing the lawn. The grass needs cutting.
Well, at least that's personal. You can keep that quiet. But I mean, even with the graphic design, maybe an odd compliment, but I kind of want to throw out there just so people really want to go take a look at it. Your website is probably the best website for any of these contributors. I gotta say, it works right. It looks good. It is logical on where you would navigate. It is easily the best.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you.
I appreciate it so much.
It's the only place now that I utilize my graphic design skills. I miss it a lot, but I've had to only in practicing, and it's the odd little thing. If somebody asks me, I'm fortunate enough to be able to turn stuff away. Somebody asked me, "Oh, could you just do me a logo?" Then I'll do a logo for them, or I'll do a little bit of design work. I mean, I love typography, and I do love illustration. I still draw with my daughter. Still got that skill set. I can sketch stuff out, and I can do all of that, but I don't show it off online. I had a DeviantArt page for my sins. It's a terrible website now where that's going. So I had a design website, and that's all my freelance, but it's just my skills have shifted towards another one of my passions. And to be honest, probably the thing I am and have always been most passionate about, it's always film.
Yeah.
And that's, it's come full circle now. And because I'm being drawn more into the media department as well at the college, I'm getting to use the TV studio and the podcast lounge and just introduce some of the students probably more so as we start the new academic year. That will probably kick up a bit, and do our own festivals at the college and use everything that I do. I want to learn something from and share. And another great thing as well at some festivals, if I can hook up with people that happen to be, I don't know, but like Amber, for instance, if you've come across Amber T, I think me and Amber, I think we're the only British contributors to Fangoria. So it's been quite nice to hook up with her at the festivals. And if there's somebody needs interviewing, it's like, well, you've not done that yet. So you go and do it and have a bit of a practice.
Right.
I think that comes from me being at college, and I just love to sort of have those connections and give people, it's not always about like taking control of it yourself. And, if I can take some students to, if they have the opportunity, some of the film students, if we have those links, then we can do that. There's a lot of it is about forging those links, I think, and not just for myself, but hopefully from others that may be able to benefit from that.
Right.
The youngsters, the youth.
We were talking before we started recording about one of the aspects, so I got to kind of link it to this, and that's really how important this community has been. I mean, there's so many people that, I hate to use the word networking because it's not really just about that, but just meeting people and kind of validating the feelings that people like you and I have had, where for years film is that passion. But I don't know if you're like me, but in like my everyday life, nobody else gives a shit about any of this.
Nobody. No, I've grown up like that. I mean, I'm an only child, so and my mum and dad they're both very pragmatic people, and they're not creative. I mean, my mum, I think she was probably somebody who could have been an illustrator herself, but she just didn't really have that kind of guidance and the right people to say, right, you go here and you do this, this, and this. But in terms of film, a film is just something they watch, and it's like, I watched this film last night. Yeah, it's good or it was bad. That's it. End of argument. Whereas I've grown up just being it was a reverse effect. By them not being like that, I was craving it. By them not taking me to the cinema regularly, I was craving it. So it just developed the imagination, because lots of people talk about this, and we're probably the last generation that would have gone to the cinema, and it was 3 years until you saw that film again, unless you went and bought another ticket to go straight back in. It's not like now where you watch stuff on streaming and flick through thumbnails for 40 minutes before you've even decided to watch something, and then watch the same thing over and over again as many times as you want. It never leaves you. And I think it's kind of a bit of a, we take it for, a lot of people take that for granted, but back then, it was incredible, really, because that film would percolate for 3 years, or part of the film would percolate because you bricked it watching it and you couldn't watch anymore. That was an amazing thing, and it affected our brains in a very, very different way. I think that's fascinating. That's a book in itself, isn't it? The way that information, or the way that a certain time period or film has affected people is a fascinating thing.
And honestly, it touches on something I've actually been thinking about lately, because obviously there's a lot of studies going on around like ADHD and the way that people are consuming everything nowadays. It's this, everything has to move quickly. It's not something that we can sit with and really absorb. I've started to wonder, will there be genuine nostalgia for the films in this part of our generation? Because yes, you can watch it multiple times, but you're not watching it once and then dreaming about it for 3 years.
I think I might be wrong, but from my point of view, I feel that nostalgia is something that rests and percolates, and has kind of, we've almost kind of had a little bit of a nostalgia overload, and probably our generation in particular is very guilty of just cherry picking all those things we loved and smashing it together to make something like Stranger Things, which is entertaining and it's a gateway. Like, my daughter loved Stranger Things until then she started watching, or was introduced to, things like the originals, Carpenter, Spielberg, and suddenly she's gone right off it, because she now sees it as a bit of a cheat. I mean, I'm not for that, and I don't think that, I think as a child brain is seeing it like that, but I like to sit down and go, well, no, let's think about this, right? That at the end of the day, this is a show that is, yes, very, very popular, but the good thing it is doing, as like Quentin Tarantino, is it's bringing in new generations like yourself to be able to watch those things. Now, not everybody is lucky enough to have a dad that is completely overloaded with all this stuff and can show you and cherry pick those exact same things. You would probably have to go and discover that yourself, or you'd have to be with the right group of friends in the playground that would then have come across that. But I don't think that is alive anymore, because it's like the TikTok, the snippets, like you're saying, the ADHD shaped media of just firing stuff constantly, and also coming up with things that is very, very quick bursts of information, more so than ever now. Like what we're doing now, discussing film, is only going to get so many people watching it, because they'll zone out. They'll certainly zone out from me gabbing on for 5 minutes. And, it's like you do a TikTok version of this, and it's like you've got 300,000 likes or what in it. That absolutely baffles me. And I am not the sort of person to want to or feel the need, just because everyone else is doing that and going on TikTok and needing all of those likes and watches, that I would have to do that to go and make someone go and read my material or watch a film I love. I don't want to buy into that particularly. I would much rather just, I'm writing something first for me because I've loved to do it and I've been commissioned to do it. And if anybody gets to read that, if one person gets to read that George C. Scott essay and they discover George C. Scott, then I've done my work. I've done it. I've done my work. That's good enough.
Well, in today's time also, even if you did fall into that trap, I don't know that those people convert to readers necessarily. Somebody that's watching a 60-second TikTok doesn't mean that they can sit down and read 12 pages about George C. Scott.
No, and I think that's the thing that really does, it saddens me. I've got to be careful what I say, really, being an educator. And I think, but because I'm in there and I'm in the thick of it, and I've been in it 20 years now.
Yeah.
I've got 20 years to measure against what I feel is pretty accurate to say that there are so many students in the classroom, and if I show them a very quick snippet of something, it will engage them. If I give them a research exercise where they have to go away and read something and then come back and write something on it, 90% of them will shut off and will not engage at that level. So that's what is already differentiating those that are academic and those that aren't. And let's be realistic, not everybody's academic, and who wants to be? Not everybody wants to be academic. And that's fine. You can still learn, and there's still different ways of learning. But from my point of view, it's like the teacher hat goes on. Inside, I'm screaming. On the outside, I'm like, well, let's find a different way of doing that then. Because it absolutely shocks me to the core, but I have to be completely professional about it still, because I've got to engage that person individually. So my challenge is, how do I get them to go away and look at something? And usually the best way of doing it is to sit down and have a conversation with them individually. If you're able to do that, and if you've got 25, 30 students in the room, a lot more difficult. If it's at higher education, where the numbers are usually smaller on our courses anyway, you can usually sit down and engage them. I had an amazing sort of level up on a learner this year, and it was pretty inspiring actually. It was black student from one of the roughest areas of London. Real kind of proper. He had a proper story to tell, and he trains to be a footballer. He'll be a professional footballer. He's actually in the training for it, and he was managing that all alongside the course. Now, straight away, not academic in the slightest, really difficult. He actually failed the first year. It was a case of, he's going to have to reset, and we're going to have to go through this. And is he going to learn from the mistakes? And he slowly did. He didn't immediately. But there was almost like a moment where it was like the cogs just turned finally in the last year of the second year, bearing in mind he'd already repeated, so he'd been there 3 years. And he chose a topic of, I think he wanted to look at violence in cinema, which is a very common thing to look at. Yep. And usually I'm a little bit, unless they understand and kind of have a way into that, because normally it's like their idea of violence in cinema is so shallow, because they are just seeing the guns and the knives and the horrible things that you see on the screen, not really stepping back from seeing, where's this coming from? So anyway, started off, gave him Bonnie and Clyde, and there was a real pushback against it, because this film is ancient to somebody who is 18, 19. Ancient. The film that's 10 years old to a 16-year-old is an old movie. So there was some pushback on it. And he watched it. He watched the first 20 minutes, and you could see him cringing and really sort of starting to whinge and complain about, this is boring. Really kind of shooting it down straight away. I left it, and I left him to it. The next week he came back and he'd watched it twice, and it blew his mind. He pushed past it, and for somebody who wasn't academic, he struggled with his writing. He managed to produce something. It wasn't like an A-class piece of writing, but it was really interesting to see where he was coming from and what he understood. And it was through having a conversation with him. Right, we've watched the film. What did you see? What was it about? Why is it a liminal moment in cinema? Why is this movie so important? And just giving him those questions to have a think about. I think that's the way. But again, not even that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
They're all individuals. And coming back to ADHD, we've come out of COVID, but the other thing that I've noticed, obviously a lot of people are noticing, is the increased epidemic of mental health and how COVID has fed into that. So before I can even have those conversations and talk to the students, all of that is already there, that the barriers and the things that you're having to push through to do with mental health. Right, a week's gone by, you've only written 2 lines of text, or you've only done 1 sketch. Is that good enough? In the olden days, you'd have just been able to go, you're bone idle, really, aren't you? You're just lazy. You can't say that. There's no way you could say that. You've got to be really kind of softly, gently. Right, okay, you've only written 1 line of text. Why is that? And you have to then have this conversation about and then that opens up, well, this happened to me and that happened to me. And it's really difficult, because I am not a therapist or a support worker, but you're expected to be now in teaching.
I would be fascinated to hear how your conversations have changed over the last 20 years, because
vastly. From literally screwing stuff up, I literally would used to take things off a student as an exercise, take it off them and say, look, what is it with this? I'm exaggerating, I didn't screw it up. But I would say, right, is it good enough? It's not, is it? To now, it's like you have to sort of really take it apart and find, ways of how they can improve it. But in the olden days, 20 years ago, 10 years ago even, yes, you could be more kind of upfront and say, I'm sorry, you're just not going to cut it. You've got to, you are going out into the real world and you are going to work. So nobody's going to employ you. It's as simple as that. And it's still that now. Inside my head, that is exactly what you should be saying. You should be able to say that. You should, because you are not preparing them for that. The softly, gently approach will work for so long until it kind of then clicks for them. They realize, right. So I think sometimes the way around that is when you get industry in, and when you get a journalist or a graphic designer or a filmmaker or someone from the BBC come in and basically impart exactly what we've been telling them for a year or two, sometimes they then, their ears prick up and they go, all right, the tutors aren't talking a load of shit then. They know what they're talking about.
Oh.
That's what it's like, yeah.
We talked about this briefly on my show last night for just a few moments, but I feel like that first generation that you were teaching really, coming up through the 90s was very like doe-eyed and expecting this almost like perfect life eventually to be happening. And then once post 9/11, a lot of the wars of the early 2000s that were happening, so much has just been nonstop for these last couple of generations of students that you do kind of have to realize a lot of these people have just been facing trauma since the day they were born. This is
exactly what it is. Yeah, and I think you have to. It is scarily quite easy to forget that. So at the forefront, you're having to think, Jesus, okay, yes, at some point they will have to start taking responsibility to complete their assignment or their work, take responsibility of the course, the things they're learning. They're having these choices given to them, they're learning, etc., etc. But you step back and you go, absolutely, none of this is their fault. They, as with all of us, we're all a product of the society we live in, the environments, the way we're brought up, all of that, before it starts getting into psychology session. But yes, post 9/11, absolutely. I also think UK-wise, I think we notice this a lot. I only taught in schools very, very briefly after I'd done my teacher training. Secondary schools in particular, awful, just been horrible. And I just didn't like it as an environment. And you really do see, and I think you notice as well when you have children, that because it's built on a factory system, it's just a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. And it's never, ever altered since in the UK. The curriculum is rigid. We are going to teach this, this, and this. If they go to a Catholic school, even more rigid. The Catholic schools then just become a pedestal to preach, religious values to, and sometimes the education is just a sideline of that,
yeah,
which isn't good. But there are some good schools. There are some amazing schools. But I do think the actual education system, what that creates is when they get to the levels I teach at, from 16, so level 3 to then through to HE, where it starts to become about a little bit more ownership, because at the end of the day, they're paying for the course by then, so you get the best students anyway. But level 3, they don't know how to think for themselves. They don't know how to, they haven't got the confidence is completely smashed, because they've got teachers going, terrible, you don't do it, I want you to do it like this, don't ask too many questions. It's kind of, hand goes up, and then already the teacher is measuring how many students they're going to be able to answer a question. And also the ridicule as well that you would get at secondary school. I mean, in the 80s, I remember, being at school, teachers said things to you, and there was no beating around the bush. They said it, and that was it, and you dealt with it. They ridiculed you if I was terrible at maths and things like that. I say I was terrible, I just couldn't give a shit about maths or science or any of these subjects. I just didn't have any interest. I was that sort of learner. If I wasn't interested in it, I would just be like the class clown and just be larking about. So there was some management there with the teachers, but some of them would literally, they would really ridicule you. You will never get anywhere without mathematics. You need this. Constantly telling you that. And your brain, I mean, my brain didn't work like that. I probably thought one of the fortunate ones that just saw through that kind of, I don't know, almost like you saw through the pedestal that they were putting themselves on. You think it's just something they're saying. And to be honest, I was confident enough in my abilities in other things that I loved and that I really focused on, that then the teachers were like, yes, there's a talent here, go for that. Some kids don't have that. They don't know what they want to do. They don't really have, or, and this is another thing it comes back to, is if you have a conversation with some learners, it's actually quite difficult, even just at a personable level, to get anything out of them of what they're interested in. If you come down to their level and just put the lesson out the window, what they're learning, what are you into then? What have you been doing over summer? And you just get a shrug of the shoulders up. You just get that. It's like, well, what do you do at home in your own time? And it's literally just a shrug of the. It's so hard to get them to share what they're into, because some of them might not have any interest, or they're not confident sharing that with you because they think you're going to ridicule them, like they may have done at school, because the school is beating out of them that they shouldn't be. You're in an art lesson, you shouldn't be copying comic book illustrators' artwork. That's not art. Look at Picasso and all of this nonsense. It's like, I went through that. I saw that as nonsense. I learned a lot from studying comic book artists. Then when I got to art college, when I did foundation, yes, that was almost an epiphany when you finally discovered like the Bauhaus or Picasso, and you understood then what abstract art was. But not all of them do. They don't know how to find things and find information. And nowadays, in the swamp that is the internet and streaming and everything, and content. Hate that term.
Hate that word.
Content. Ironically, we're becoming part of content,
of course.
But yeah, it is. It's like you've got to be able to know how to find those golden nuggets. I think, which are just like spark something, and just then you kind of go off in one direction, and you're like, oh my god, this is absolutely fascinating.
Right.
I'm so thirsty for this now. I need to draw it. I need to paint it. I need to write about it. Amazing. I remember being at art college. I remember my lecturer coming up to me, and I was working on this oil painting. It was the first time I was learning how to use oils. And he came up to me and he looked at this painting. Now, this is a prime example of how important it is to be educated and know your stuff and go out there and find things and at least understand what has gone before. And at 18, I thought what I was painting was the most original thing out there.
Didn't we all? Yeah.
I see it in my own students. Everything they do, they think it's the most original thing. They've never not been done before. And what it was just I'd studied. They gave us a topic of stairways. They always give you something really mundane to look at in order to find something interesting. So I was kind of tracing stairs and then going and exploring old buildings and getting tracing paper and then retracing over that and then putting the stairs together in an oil painting. Well, it just became an Escher painting. I never knew who Escher was. And the lecturer's like, looks like an Escher painting. And I was like, huh? Who's Escher? He introduced me to Escher and it was like, oh my God. But by osmosis, because one of the earliest films I'd seen, or the earliest people, it had an influence on me getting into movies. Coming back to Jim Henson, Dark Crystal, via Labyrinth, and David Bowie, and The Stair. It's again another artist being influenced by Escher. So it was kind of teaching me that every artist is inspired by other artists, and that what you put down isn't original. It never really is. It's just a version of what you bring to it. I don't know. Did it stop me painting those stairs? No, but I've seen it in students where you do say something to them and they just completely lose heart. So you have to make them understand that no, this is still your work. It's your version of that. What can you do to make that a little bit different? What other influences can you bring into that just to put another twist on it? The more you absorb, the more it will come out. You don't understand that when you're young.
One thing that we don't ever really talk about in terms of this is that the act of being inspired it can be a skill set that people don't understand that you need to have. So whether it's film, writing, or artist, there's so much that even just seeing something, while that can inspire you, there's ways to pull from that. There's ways for you to grow that in you. And depending on your influences and how you've been raised in your experiences and everything around you, that can quash that can completely embolden that. There are multiple ways that we can be inspired. So,
absolutely. No, you bang on. Definitely. There is absolutely a skill set in that. I think only since I've been teaching have I understood that, because in a way, it's a strange thing when you are teaching. Yes, you kind of, there's your audience and platform and the people you're imparting knowledge on. But at the same time, it's automatically giving you a perspective of how much you know and how much other people don't know. And that's not in an arrogant way. It's just so I understand this, and this is the level that we're coming in at them. So I have to immediately, it's like dialing things down, completely dialing it down. If I'm writing an essay for the boutique labels, or if I'm doing something for Fangoria, my writing, what I'm imparting there, I'm firing on 110%. It's like using every part of what I know and more, and even things I'm learning as well through that writing. But sometimes if I'm teaching, it might be that I'm having to deliver at 50% of what I know, sometimes even 10%. That's not to sound like really negative. It's just the way you have to work as a tutor. Otherwise, you will completely lose them. I have to, because I'm teaching at different levels. So if I'm teaching on the final year of a BA, the degree level, then obviously my knowledge is I'm going to ramp that up because I know they're ready for that. And it's all part of the progression as well. You've got to show the progression of the learning. You're not going to go in there firing at 100%. You'd scare the shit out of them, and you'd lose 80% of your students as well. And the college would be like, what the hell's happened to your students? Where have they gone? You can't do that.
Well, and not to mention delivering that in that environment is unfiltered, unprepared, unedited. And when you're writing for Fangoria, a lot of people don't realize you've written that probably 4 times and gone over it with the fine-tooth comb many times, maybe had somebody else look at it. And it is the complete, like, what you see is the perfect progression of all of the work that you could pour into this tiny article.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's quite nice to read students' essays, and sort of, again, that's another measurement of, okay, this is what this individual knows, this is what they've learned, this is what they've understood, but backing it up as well. Another thing as well, I mean, just going back to what I was saying earlier, is that even just teaching them about plagiarism, you would be surprised how many of them will do that by default. Now, some of them do it intentionally. They absolutely do it intentionally because they know no other way around getting past this essay, because they cannot write. They cannot string a sentence together. They really struggle. And that's because, they've had a bad time at school. Again, it's the school system telling them they're worthless and this and that. It's not good. But then you'll get some that they don't realise they've plagiarised. So, for instance, you have, if they're going to do a bit of research and they don't put their citations in the right format, then obviously when we put that through the system, it scans it and it shows us. I used to use have to use my discretion to say, well, they've tried. That is clearly a quote. They've just not formatted it properly. There might be that they literally lift. I mean, I've had literally students. I've had grown men in their late 40s on courses hand essays into me, knowing full well that they did not write that, because I've had conversations with them. It's why I have conversations with students as well, so I can gauge their voice and what their language and their vocabulary. You read the essay and you go, they haven't read that. You don't even have to go through the official software. You literally cut and paste the first paragraph into Google. It'll take you straight to the essay. I had one student, this particular student, late 40s, mature student, and he cut and pasted the whole essay except for, in my opinion, clunk, and it was like the whole essay was cut and pasted. So I got him in the office and I showed him this essay. I was like, could you just explain why this is, again, soft, even something as serious as that, you have to could you just explain to me why? In the old days, you're like, after the course, it's fraud, basically. And he responded with, have you ever heard the expression "great minds think alike"? He actually said that to me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And this is the same student who basically printed out a 72 DPI sketch of a kettle design or something, because he was a 3D student, and printed this thing out and blew it up to A4 and then signed the bottom of this. And it was a pixelated sketch. He was trying to sell off as like a genuine real sketch that he...
How was he fitting in that room with you with his massive balls? I mean,
that
is wild.
Oh, he had balls. Yeah.
Oh,
he definitely had balls. Yeah.
Well, getting back to inspiration and getting back to Rich, with people that I especially appreciate writing work and the way that they are able to convey a message to people, many people would look at this and say, well, what are some of your favorites? I'm more curious, what inspires you as a writer? What are some works that over your life have been the pieces that make you say, damn it, I want to write like that?
Are we talking like specifically essays or books? Specific writers in film?
Anything that you want.
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of journalism, I would. It comes back to Mark Kermode for me, and I'm not saying in terms of just his writing. I just think as an individual who just loves films, loves movies, and is extremely passionate about it, and shares it all the time through his podcasts and everything. Mark Kermode, definitely one of them. Probably the first person I remember who was remotely, I say journalistic, or a siphon of film, and getting it out there and sharing it. Whereas in the UK, we had a program in the late 80s, early 90s called Movie Drone with Alex Cox, the film director. So we'd have this show on like Sunday evenings, BBC Two. And it was a true awakening. So you had kind of almost, from my point of view, it was like film before Alex Cox arrived, on Sunday nights, and film before. For me, it was like, everything up to that point was just like The Dark Crystal on loop and Jaws and, the most popular movies you could think of. He comes along, you're late, you're late up. You should be in bed for school on a Monday morning, and you're kind of there lying in bed and watching this guy talk about the most obscure movies. Because the great thing about Alex Cox is, he's a proper epitome of cult movies, and that's what the program was about. And then Mark Cousins took over them, who's gone on to do like Story of Film, but yeah, that definitely in terms of like presenting those films, that was a real kind of moment. And that was just around the time, I think, in fact, it wasn't that long after, probably about 2 years later when I went to art college. Like with everybody, if you do end up at art college, you're just surrounded by fellow weirdos who will just go, "Here, have you seen this?" And they'll like slip you a pirate copy of Man Bites Dog or Clerk. Yep. And again, that was another step up for me. It was like, fucking hell, what is this? I've never seen anything like it, like Man Bites Dog at that point in my life when you're 18 and really quite impressionable. And and it blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. But I would probably say at the last sort of 10 years, I would say, what's his name? In fact, I've got his book there. What's his name? I always forget his name. Yeah, W. Scott Paul. It did Wasteland. Have you read Wasteland?
I've not read it yet. I've been meaning to.
Really good. And he did another one called, I think he's the same one that did Monsters in America. Yeah, he is. I've got Monsters in America up there. He does these amazing studies, like deep dives of periods in history in relation to film. So Wasteland is all about the impact of World War One, and coming back to what you're saying about trauma and how cinema completely changed with German expressionism, and great books. So yeah, there's quite a few there. Some that are more kind of written, crossing over into having their own shows. Mark Commode had his own shows. He's always the face of film, really, in this country. And then you've got Alex Cox, who I think is a really good one that crosses over from making those movies, those cult movies himself, and then imparting and sharing the most obscure shit you would ever have seen at the ripe age of 13, 14.
Right. Well, I would be remiss to not dive into some sort of physical media, as you have so much behind you. What are some of the most exciting things that you've been seeing in your mind lately? Because we were kind of touching on Second Sight, and to me, I don't know that anybody else is matching them in terms of quality across the board anywhere.
No, I'm biased, probably because I've wrote a lot. I mean, I've done a lot for 101. I've had 4 back to back recently. So you're probably going to see quite a few releases. Whether they are, I don't know if they'll get released back to back. They might spread them out.
Are you on? I think you're on Following coming out, right?
I'm not on Following. Sarah's on. Have you interviewed Sarah Appleton yet?
Not yet. I need to.
Oh, I'll get her on. She's amazing. Her and Philip, brilliant. She's got a documentary coming out, premiering at Fright Fest, actually, called J-Horror Virus.
Oh, that's right.
She did the found footage phenomenon with Philip as well. So Philip is now he kind of heads Second Sight and dishes out the projects. He's a project manager, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think she covered the interviews, does a lot of the video footage, extra feature work as well. So no, I can't. All I can say is I'm doing 2 Abel Ferraras. I'm doing a Denis Villeneuve, who's my favourite favourite director at the minute. I absolutely adore Villeneuve. Nice. And I'm doing a Stephen King related release. I say related, tenuous.
Very nice. Denis, I don't talk about enough on the show because he's genuinely, I think he's shown in a very short amount of time this massive amount of growth when you get this, his source material combined with budget, and he creates still this just intense drama and beautiful spectacles.
He is one of them rare filmmakers, isn't it? I guess a little bit like Christopher Nolan, coming from Following, who is, created something. I mean, he made something that was so kind of, ad hoc and improvised, but tradition, real. And that's stuck with him, I think. And the whole play with time and everything. Villeneuve, again, he's one of those rare filmmakers who crosses over from somebody who's got such an artistic vision, like a proper auteur, who has now started to become a little bit more commercial, some would say, because of the size of the films. But even so, they're not. They're not commercial movies, because not everybody... Look, they're still obscure enough. Dune is still an obscure enough story and dense enough to alienate the masses. But what he's doing, he's breaking down those barriers between the art house and commercial. So it's almost like that's what Villeneuve is for me. Feels like he's the perfect crossover of somebody who understands the art of cinema and somebody that understands the spectacle of it, who is still able to channel those very, very, very quiet moments, like a Kurosawa movie, the wind blowing, and he's able to capture that. And I don't think many filmmakers now in that stratosphere on the big screen in IMAX are doing that.
That's true.
Christopher Nolan and him. That's the only two I can think of off the top of my head of that generation. I think he is, and I'm sure everybody else has referred to this, he is the next Ridley Scott, without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, this connection with Blade Runner, but he's then some. I mean, there is something that percolates under Villeneuve's work in terms of what he understands about fear and how he dramatizes that through the canvas of a father whose daughter goes missing, to a mother who loses their daughter, to fear is the mind killer. It's like it's amazing how he just, this is the thing I'm focused on in my movies. This is it. And then he just like builds the canvas up around that.
In every genre too. That's the other thing.
Every genre. Prisoners,
he can cross over everything.
Prisoners alone, I think, is... Do you know what? I'd be hard pressed to find anything better than that in terms of a thriller. That, to me, it's certainly the best, one of the best thrillers this century.
Oh yeah,
it's certainly within my top 3 thrillers of all time. Thrillers are so rare. They're like a dead genre, that because they kind of get absorbed, the thriller automatically gets absorbed, I feel, into other genres. Yep. Only in the 90s, go further back, thrillers were more distinctive, but the 90s felt like it was like the last decade of the thriller. Like, it was a decade which had so many brilliant thrillers, and you could say they were a thriller. Like, now you look at some horror movies and you go, it's not really a horror movie, it's a thriller. I interviewed Dee Wallace the other day, and she clearly said, I don't look at Cujo as a horror movie, and she was right. It's not really a horror movie; it is a thriller. It's also a domestic drama. It's got these like King elements to it, I think.
Yeah, so, and some horrifying moments.
And horrifying moments, yeah. But yeah, Prisoners. Oh my god! I tell you, I could talk 3 hours on Villeneuve. He astonishes me. Absolutely.
I feel like I could talk 3 hours just on Prisoners. The big thing for me is the performances that he pulls out of specifically like 5 people in that movie. They shouldn't be possible to be acting like that.
I mean, Hugh Jackman.
Yeah,
he's an amazing actor anyway. In that, I mean, you see him in something like The Fountain when he like breaks down and he's putting the ink into his finger at the ring. Is, oh my God, that is one of the most incredible moments of seeing a man fall apart I've ever seen. Then you see him in Prisoners, and it's like coming back to George C. Scott, isn't it?
Yep.
The rage. Like you would never think Hugh Jackman's got that in him because he's such a happy, smiley guy and the singing and dancing guy, you know. But he is incredible in Prisoners. Could be his best performance.
I don't think anything comes close to me.
I mean, it's pretty phenomenal. And everybody in that film, Paul Dano is just amazing in it. Gyllenhaal can do no wrong for me. Amazing.
Gyllenhaal was on a tear around then because I think he was incredible in Nightcrawler too. And that
now Nightcrawler is, for me, that's in my top 3 movies this century, absolutely. And if we were talking, that's kind of another thriller as well. I always think that there's always 2 movies that really stand out to me this century. And obviously, Prisoners is one of them, but I kind of put that in the Villeneuve box. Looking at movies in general, I always come back to Nightcrawler and The Red Turtle. And it's always about them 2 movies this century for me, because it's become... I'm great at 20th century cinema. The older I've got and the more I've gone into the 21st century, where, let's be honest, we're living in the future we imagined anyway. So things are almost like a lot harder to pinpoint when that film was made. Yep. Everything's a bit more foggy there, where I could go, such and such a film was made in when? 2004. I would really struggle. Whereas I can rattle off a year from 80s, 90s. I can pinpoint movies in the 20th century. But for me, Nightcrawler, which again, is like the Taxi Driver of this century, isn't it? It's the Lou Bloom, vampiric kind of character that's out there doing what he shouldn't be doing. And that kind of rise as well. What a character arc. It's amazing. And then The Red Turtle, because I love my animation, I always put that on such a pedestal as well. And I use them films, those 2 movies for me are like a benchmark. It's like every film I watch, not in a dismissive way, I can compartmentalize it and the genres and everything, but in terms of quality and how something is made, they're the benchmarks. They're for me. And when I watch another movie, I go, oh my God. And they seem to come around every decade, don't they? Every decade you'll go and see a movie at the cinema and it might not be a masterpiece. Top Gun Maverick isn't what people would call a masterpiece, but fuck me. Seeing that in the cinema was literally it's been 10 years. 10 years since I felt like that. It's a feeling. That's what film does as well. The feeling where you have to put aside all this snobbishness about I don't watch the MCU because I'd much rather go and watch my Severin back catalogue of slashers and do you know what I mean? It's utter nonsense. You can watch the MCU and you can watch Severin catalogue.
And enjoy them both.
And enjoy them. I'm not into this kind of, although I am one of those people that has become fatigued now. I hate saying that, but I have become superhero fatigued. But I can, I don't have a problem watching the ones I enjoy still. I could put Winter Soldier on 1 minute, and then I watched, what was the last thing I watched? Infinity Pool. I mean, if you want polarizing films, then just watch anything and everything and test yourself. Yeah. I mean, I am known, people that know me personally, I have been known for being quite prudish. I have been. But I will watch certain films which will really test my prudishness. Infinity Pool in particular, we know that. But I watch things like Irreversible and all of these films. Now, I don't choose to watch them necessarily because I want to watch that film. It might be because it's a particular filmmaker that I've had to research, or I've become interested in their way of filming. And I think what most importantly you get out of really pushing your limits of what you can watch is, can you see through the mud and the dirt and the grime,
right,
and see the filmmaking? Gaspar Noé is a prime example of that. Is that his films are so challenging and so explicit.
Oh yeah,
but you see how well made they are, and there is no way you can say that his movies are bad quality, because they are pretty phenomenal in terms of how they're shot and what he plays around with. Really, really incredible. And again, seeing the journey of that filmmaker go from like a short film to, you know, an early movie, then post Irreversible, where his films go, and what he's then doing with camera work, what he's learned from that film, what he's taken into the next one, which I think is, again, coming back to Villeneuve, you can see with each movie, and he's on record as saying this, is that he's going through that movie in the same way I like when I go through my essays, in learning something and then building on that like bricks with the next film, which is, you can clearly see that journey with Villeneuve, the way his films have just become bigger and bolder, but had the same threads and themes in there, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the best part about looking back, especially when you get some of these boutique releases, because you can take that journey in retrospect. So with Villeneuve, you can go back and watch Enemy and see Gyllenhaal in a performance who is now put in multiple performances for Villeneuve, and see how nuanced he is in this. Quite honestly, it's a fairly simple doppelganger story, but it's overall, it's still this like almost a thriller, but it's so well done and so engaging, not just because of the performances, but it's capturing something on screen that is, so many people just would have given up on doing something so complex with it.
Oh, definitely. And that is a very obscure one of his, I think. It's a very Kafkaesque kind of thing going on, a metamorphosis, and looking at the kind of the way he has that thing with, in some of his films, he'll very much explore the masculine and then he'll explore the feminine.
Yep.
And he's very good at that. He'll bring characters to the forefront, which I think that's why I certainly haven't got any issues at all when he starts bringing forward the female characters from the Dune novel in part 2, because if any director's going to do that and understand the marginalized female characters from the novel and bring them more to the front, he is going to nail it. And I know that Dune Part 2 is going to be incredible. I just know it is. That trailer, that last trailer, I mean, I can't even remember the last time I got goosebumps watching a trailer, but that was phenomenal. But yeah, it comes back, doesn't it, to like, again, taste. Dune isn't for everybody. There's many people you'll sit down with, saw Dune, didn't get it. I didn't understand any of it. But did you enjoy it? Some people go, yeah, I enjoyed it, I appreciate it. Some will just go, no, it was terrible. So that's what I really hate, that whole snap decision thing you get a lot, which is what social media has generated, where the trolls or the people on a social media post will just go, it was shit, and that's it, it was trash, it was, I mean, come on, like, I can understand somebody watching Dune and being completely lost and not understanding it. There's no way you can call that movie trash.
Most people that felt that way, they didn't know going into it that it was mostly a politics story.
Yeah.
So it's hard to respect that sort of a response either.
Nah, you can't. But this is coming from maybe people that at least the last 10 years they've been used to that kind of storytelling through Game of Thrones, which basically Game of Thrones is just Dune. It's just a fantasy version of that. Or it's Berserk meets Dune. It's, again, that takes so much from other mediums and genres. I think George R.R. Martin has just kind of just gone, yeah, I really like that manga and I like this sci-fi novel, and he's kind of just done his own thing with it.
There's going back to inspiration again. Exactly.
It is.
Just
it is.
doing something with it.
But is Game of Thrones bad because of that? No, of course it isn't. It's his own thing.
Speaking of inspiration, I got to ask, because I've enjoyed your writing for quite some time. Obviously, you don't have the opportunity to write on whichever film you always choose, because nothing is always getting out, being released for rich necessarily. No. What are a handful of films that you would be like over the moon to get offered for?
Any movie, even outside of cult cinema, or are we talking kind of niche stuff that, right? Okay, so I mean, I think the one that I've mentioned before that has always been a dream, going back to Nightcrawler, without a doubt. If I ever saw a super duper release, I would absolutely love to write about that. The others are like the bigger releases. Never really, we know, being in this niche corner, that those huge releases don't get that sort of treatment anymore, and they certainly don't get essays. So it's always going to come back to very particular films. Nightcrawler is right up there. I mean, of course, Holy Trinity, Jaws, Blade Runner, The Thing, they are like the three films I absolutely have always obsessed over and would always sort of go back to those three. So, but saying that, what else can be written about those films? In all honesty, it's got to be a film that, and that's why it comes back to something like Nightcrawler. There is so much to write about. And I think even more so now. That's the beauty of that film, is that we feel like the Lou Blooms are they're just there, more so now than ever. You could kind of, there's so much to tap into, so many angles with that idea of the media, and how, or an individual's kind of the sociopath angle. Oh my God. The analogies in there, the kind of metaphor, the vampire kind of angle. Yeah, wow. I couldn't really put anything above that film, what I would love to write about. So just have to do that
film that deserves a deluxe release too. I really hope somebody does something for it.
Yeah, it needs it. Absolutely. And it is. I do find that when you are writing about films, and I guess that comes from because you pitch as well, and you always have to find a sort of fresh angle, which in some ways it goes back to what I was on about earlier. You need to almost find something that nobody else has written about. Do you know what? Sometimes you just want to write about a film you love, whether someone's written about it or not. Like I have written about Jaws, I've written about it for publications, and I've written about Blade Runner for publications, and I've written about The Thing for publications. But I wrote about them more so from a personal point of view. What is that film to me? What was my memory of it? And what was some of the understandings of it as well, maybe at an early age? And I think you're surprised sometimes how much people love to hear people's personal points of view about a film. That it's not always about taking it apart in minute detail and always analysing something, which I love to do, but it's exhausting. Like sometimes you want to kind of just come away from that and go, oh, Jesus. And that's why you need your Winter Soldier films and your MC. And I often will put an animate. That's why I love animation, because animation for me is a real comfort blanket. If I've absorbed too much shit that's like, oh God, this is dark. I want to wipe Infinity Pool out of my head. Then I'll watch Super Pets or something.
Animation is a great palate cleanser. I will say that.
God, you have to do that. Yeah, it's great.
So when you're feeling down after watching too many movies, just go watch like Watership Down or something. That's perfect.
Yeah. There you go. There's another one. I'd love to write something about Watership Down, which there was going to be a BFI release of that, but they pulled it, which was gutted about that.
Well, and they did that recently for Targets, and then that came back. So I'm curious. Maybe Criterion is doing a release, and they're waiting to release a BFI till after that or something.
Possibly. I think with Target, it was something to do with the timing of it, wasn't it? Because of the subject matter.
Yep.
I think that's why it was pulled originally. I don't think it was something to do with rights or other releases. I might be wrong.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't always get the answers to these either.
No.
Nightcrawler, the Red Turtle, great options here. I do want to point everybody to Rich's website again. Anything that you want to learn, you've got everything laid out so wonderfully there, just accessible. You've got links to everything. Writing for Fangoria, you've got Second Sight, 101 Films. Anything else coming up that you want to hype up for anybody?
So at the minute, in fact, the last few months, I've been focusing more on sort of interviews, written interviews. I mean, I am interviewing them backstage, and then I'm kind of putting stuff out via Arrow Films website and Fangoria as well. So for Arrow, I did a series of interviews that were linked to Arrow Player's curation service called Selects. So if you go on Arrow Player, you'll notice that Josh Rubin, who's been on this show, he's great. I mean, he's just so generous with his time. So I did an Arrow one with Josh. Who else have I done? Anthony Scott Burns that did Come True. That's a great movie as well. With recent years. Upcoming, I think it was just announced, got Reece Shearsmith again, who I've interviewed before. So sometimes I've kind of interviewed people 2 or 3 times. Like I go back to them and go, "Oh, do you want to do this?" So what's happened from that with certain contacts or people I've met at festivals? I've then presented an idea for something, hopefully, which will go out by the time this goes live. Is I'm inviting guests in to explore Fangoria's magazine archives. So what they do is they'll pick three Fangoria issues from the back issues from like the 80s and 90s, and then they discuss those issues and specifically the films that are on those covers. And it's been a really nice thing to do. So the first one, the first one that's coming on is Gala Avery from Video Archives podcast.
Wow,
who was an utter delight. She's really really easy to chat to, very knowledgeable, as you see on listen to on the Video Archives. She's one that goes toe to toe with her dad and Quentin Tarantino on that. So she's brilliant to chat to. And then I've got Patton Oswalt as well after that.
Wow.
So that's what I've been focusing on is using my kind of some of my networking and the contacts I've got so far to propose and try and get people to do interviews with a bit of an angle, bit of a twist, that so I can focus on that. And then what I'm trying to do is match up, because I tend to focus on anniversary pieces. Yeah. If there's ever an opportunity to merge those where it'll be an anniversary piece, but it'll be an interview, like the Psycho 2 with Tom Holland. And I've got Cujo 40th with Dee Wallace as well. I tend to try and do that as well. It doesn't always work because, what's the chances of getting William Friedkin to the Exorcist 50th? I'm going to have to find another way around that. So that'll be the latest ones to look out for. And then whenever, I guess, some of the 101 news drops, Crimes of the Future, imminent, but I think it's been pushed forward. I think it's the 11th of September, if I recall. Yep. So that's it. Fright Fest will be the next big thing. So if there's anybody in the UK, come and say hello. I'll be there for the 5 days. I'll be in some of the press screenings that I'm going to be trying to put out. I don't normally write reviews, but I'm taking more than advantage of it at Fright Fest because they're screeners, and I love to support independent cinema.
Right.
And if I get that opportunity, I've seen some absolute corkers so far. Literally fresh off the colour grade, and like send the screener over, and it's really interesting to watch. So I think Eight Eyes I've got next to watch, which is creating a little bit of buzz. And as I said, Sarah's documentary J Horror Virus.
I can't wait to see that one. Something about Asian cinema has just all encompassed me over these last few years. A lot of these boutiques giving it so much love, obviously on the martial arts side, but the horror and the drama side has finally gotten some good love and nice attention.
I mean, Eureka, who I've done a few pieces for, have really focused on that the last couple of years. It's been nice to see that, obviously they've gained a lot of rights to a lot of Asian cinema, and there's some brilliant ones coming out. Releases as well recently. Is it Revenge? I can't remember what it's called now. There's a samurai movie by the same writer as Seven Samurai.
I feel like that's right. It's either that or Something's Revenge.
Yeah, I can see the picture of it now. That's one that's on my list to get because I really want to see that. It's meant to be amazing. So Eureka, fantastic, really good label.
They're special too, because again, the spreading out of genres, and a lot of people have complained because Eureka's done so many martial arts films over the last couple of years, but it's not just martial arts. A lot of their stuff, it's martial arts with a comedy angle, or it's martial arts that are fully dramatic, or it's rarely just like an action fest.
Yeah. Oh no, it is definitely there's a mix in there, but they still put out their silent classics, and the odd noir in there. I think it's mainly come out of the rights coming to an end on certain films, so they've had to focus on getting as much of the Asian material out, which they got hold of, and then there might be a period where then it will kind of revert back, and there'll be a flux of silent cinema again. But I think they're an amazing label, and there's a lot of fantastic labels out there. I was really sad to see Network on Air go into liquidation because they put out some incredible films, and do you know what? There were some movies that I remember clearly discovering through Network on Air, such as what's it called? It's called Raw Meat in America, Deathline in the UK. They put an incredible Blu-ray out of that, and it was the first time, probably about 5 years ago, first time I'd ever seen this film. I ended up doing a 50th piece for Fangoria on it, and it's just a brilliant movie, and I'll recommend to anybody who's never seen it. It's one of the best horror movies of the 70s, and it's kind of pre-Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well, and it's got that gnarly vibe to it as well. The special effects are, fresh. They don't feel stale and dusty like a Hammer movie. It's really it feels like a real bridge between those films and then what started to come with Texas Chainsaw.
Nice.
And it was lovely as well. I got a random message, like a DM message via Twitter, I think. And it was from the director. Like he'd read this piece, and I was like, "It's a joke." And it was actually him.
Nice. That's gotta be validating.
Amazing film. I can't recommend it enough. It's quite very much overlooked, I think. Did you manage to pick that up?
I did not. I think I only have like 3 network releases.
Have you got Deathline Raw Meat at all on any other foot? Right, absolutely put that right at the top of your list. If you can hunt it down,
consider it purchased.
If you can get the network version, because it's great, and it's the restoration of it it just looks incredible, and it's great because it's got Donald Pleasant in it, and it's
always good.
Yeah, he's a little bit hammy in it, but it sort of fits with the film. And there's a bit that's pre-American Werewolf in London. I don't want to spoil it for people, but you watch it and you go, surely to God, John Landis watched this film. And there's a specific moment you just go, oh my God, it's exactly like it.
We've been sort of speculating about the network thing a little bit, and obviously you're not going to have, major answers or anything like that, but any insider ideas that, do you think anybody would pick up a lot of the rights that network had? Because a lot of the films they released, no one else has released them anywhere else.
Well, they had a niche in the British television angle. They released Captain Scarlet and Robin of Sherwood, which is arguably the greatest Robin Hood adaptation. So I think I haven't heard anything personally, but I think it's whichever label sees that they probably want to have that catalogue, because that's what network really owned, I think.
Right.
I think personally they are a really good fit to have as something to be absorbed into Second Sight, because you are getting some labels now. Radiance are very big on bringing over, like Fun City editions. That they become Radiance are not just becoming this selfish brand; they're becoming like this umbrella. To bring in other labels that they can distribute and get out there, which, Jesus, I can't keep up with Radiance. I cannot get over what Fran is doing over there. It's unbelievable what he's putting out, like one thing after the other. So if a label such as Second Sight do a similar thing, because at the end of the day, there's still that catalogue there, that if nobody buys it up, it's just going to fall by the wayside and just become eBay scalpers.
Yep.
Just kind of having this stuff, and then just because it's deleted or a label's gone into liquidation, the prices are going to go through the roof. And I think it'd be a shame if that happens. So somebody definitely needs to do something with it, because it's just incredible stuff they've got. Really good.
Well, I'd love to give you back your evening. Thank you for all of this time so far. This has been astonishing. The journey through teaching and inspiration, and a lot of just the obscure parts of this conversation. I don't see having that conversation with many other people. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's been great. It's good to chat. Who doesn't like to chat about movies?
Right. And I don't get a chance to talk about Nightcrawler very often. Denis Villeneuve. I mean, it's amazing.
It's an episode in itself. I am noticing the more people I'm interviewing in the industry as well, is they're more than happy just to talk about films. They love films. That's why they are in the industry. Not just because they want to make them, but they love movies, and they love to talk about them. And that they're fans first and foremost, and it's lovely to see that. Some of these interviews I've done, I kind of wish I did have my own YouTube or my own podcast, but there's not enough time in the day for me. I have to just find a particular focus, because some of them you listen to and you just go, "Oh my God, this is gold dust! This is a podcast episode. It's so funny." Like Pat and Oswald, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We disappeared down. I had to edit it out of what I was writing because it wasn't relevant. But we disappeared down a Tom Cruise rabbit hole, and it was just amazing. And we were talking about, separating him, the Scientologist from the filmmaker, and the way he was responding to it was, oh my God, it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. It'd be a sort of thing if I had a Patreon. I'd be like, I'll put it on a Patreon account or something. Yeah. But yeah, amazing, really. That's
great. Incredible. I love Patton. Anyways, for everybody else that watches and listen, please go check out the links in the description below. Rich is getting to be prolific and in lots of different places, so make sure that you stay up on it because, man, high quality all across the board. So thank you for all of that.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. And thanks for your support as well. It's lovely to hear feedback and, people are actually reading the essays.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to have to do this again eventually. So thanks for...
Yeah, anytime. Yep, you know where to find me. Just across the pond, turn left.
Just a 7-hour delay. No big deal.
No problem.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Night, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.